Hey, what is happening, everybody? Welcome. No, I am not Keith. So let's just get that right out of the way first and foremost. No, my name is Sammy Jarouche, the host of US 101, a weekly show that discusses American history and the headlines that have to do with that topic we are discussing for that week. Guys, we're doing another one. We're getting the band back together, so to speak. A couple weeks ago, myself, along with the curator of this YouTube channel, one Keith Hughes. Keith, say hello to your people.
Hello to my people. Hello, people.
So Keith Hughes, and of course the most esteemed and most dapper Southern raconteur with the most magnificent je ne sais quoi, one Tom Ritchie. Tom, say hello to the people.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I don't speak good French. I have no idea what je ne sais quoi means. I just know that it's raining outside, and at least I've got the sense to come in from the rain, but that's why my hair's all like soaking wet. But anyway, yeah, looking forward to having another good discussion with y'all this evening. It was really fun last time. Let's see how it goes. Talking about guns, right?
Whoa, we're talking about them guns, 6-shooters and the like, man. Tom Ritchie looking like extra from the Bourne Identity, just coming out the rain. It's awesome. I like it. I'm a fan of that. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, the three of us decided to get together to have another live Google Hangout to discuss something that's obviously very, very much in the news. That would be the topic of gun control. Unfortunately, we're not talking about this just because, hey, you know, it'd be a cool topic to discuss. Unfortunately, there is a reason behind this discussion, and unfortunately, it is an incredibly sad reason, and that, of course, would be the recent mass shooting that occurred in Las Vegas, Nevada. For those of you that don't know, I don't know how that's possible, but for those of you that don't know, there was a mass shooting in Las Vegas, Nevada. The gunman, Stephen Paddock, had multiple assault rifles up in the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay in his hotel room, to which he broke through the windows of said hotel, aimed said assault rifles down at a crowd at a country music festival that was occurring in Vegas across the street from the Mandalay Bay, and proceeded to open fire. And the problem with that is when you are in a music festival, you are sort of corralled into an area, thus making the shooting seem like literally shooting fish in a barrel, which is an incredibly unfortunate situation because Paddock ended up murdering 58 people, I believe, and injured over 500 people before ultimately killing himself before being taken away by authorities that stormed the Mandalay Bay. So I think it's safe to say, first and foremost, speaking on behalf of all three of us, that we absolutely do not condone any of this kind of behavior when it comes to the use of a gun, regardless of whether it's a pea shooter, an air rifle, or whether it's just a full-on automatic. All three of us, were incredibly saddened by what happened. I know for a fact that all three of us tried to let people know our thoughts and our feelings about the situation, and we wanted to invoke action from you guys, whether it was if you wanted to donate blood, or if you wanted to donate money, or if you wanted to donate time, even if it was just a shoulder to cry on something, to let the people of Las Vegas know that they are definitely in our hearts, for sure. But the main conversation that popped up following this shooting was the topic of gun control. People on one side started saying, okay, now let's talk about gun control. This has to become an issue of the day. We have to start discussing it like right this second. Like, it has to be a thing. While the other side was like, let's hold off. We ain't talking about gun control. Not today. Today is a day of mourning. Today is a day of reflection. Today is a day of trying to understand what happened. And of course, because there are two sides to the story, both sides, instead of trying to find a common ground, both sides decide to just clash heads with each other repeatedly until everybody's head starts to hurt. So let's kick off with this point. And Keith, let's start with you, because you were so kind as to host this conversation on your channel. Following the shooting in Las Vegas, following any mass shooting for that matter, whether it was the movie theater in Aurora, whether it was Sandy Hook, whether it was San Bernardino, whether it was the shooting in West Virginia. When do you feel is the time to begin the discussion of gun control? Do you feel that it's a time that, do you feel that the conversation has to start immediately after the shooting has begun, or do you side with the idea of, okay, let's give it a day or two to breathe, let's find out all the facts, and then let's jump into the actual discussion and whether or not there's something we can do?
Well, that's a large bubble to blow into. But what I'd start off by saying is that I think that ideologically, where people sit, as you kind of mentioned before, they kind of stay there. So I think that no matter when you want to have, as a gun control advocate or somebody who's willing to talk about that issue, have that conversation with somebody who's standing firmly kind of in the more literal interpretation of the Second Amendment, they're never going to want to have that conversation, because that conversation, I think, in their paradigm is, kind of leading to the snowball effect, and it's not the government's place, and the Second Amendment is pure. So I don't think, in terms of ideological camps, whether you're having this conversation and bringing it up between massacres or right after a massacre, it's still going to spark, I think, the same reaction from those who are opposed to the conversation to begin with. So I think that's where I stand. I think that, obviously when it happens, it's easier to corral the American people to focus on it and to kind of force, especially the Republican side, at least to answer some questions. And that's just not going to happen during those dull moments when massacres are not occurring. It's just not going to be a conversational, piece. So we can dive into kind of the arguments themselves about gun control and constitutionality and whether they work or they don't work and all of that stuff. But I think the conversation coming from somebody who does believe in some regulation, and I'll refine my points about my own personal beliefs about guns and the Second Amendment as we have this conversation. But I do believe, yeah, I'll have that conversation after the massacre, between massacres, if you want to wait till the next one. I'm willing and able to have that conversation whenever the other side wants to have that conversation.
Tom, why do you think that there is the one side that wants to preface any discussion of gun control or discussion of guns with, let's lay back for a second, let's hold off for a day or two, and then we'll see what we can discuss and see what we can talk about? Why do you think that there is a side that starts the discussion with that line, with that logic?
Well, I think it's really the same reason people have a discussion about anything, whether you're talking about guns or illegal immigration. When people want to take, have a discussion of about something, take sides, how they're going to vote, healthcare, for example. I mean, people think about, is there a perceived benefit here? And politicians, and this is something I'm really hoping that some AP government people are watching, because Keith and I both have some experience with that. I'm going to try to throw down some vocabulary. We know that the reason why politicians do what they do is to get elected. That is the number one thing that a politician does. And so, for example, I mean, the thing is, Sammy, I don't care when the conversation happens or doesn't happen. It doesn't really affect me, because the conversation is useless. All right. You take Hillary Rodham Clinton, who's going to tweet, oh, we've got to have this conversation now, all of that. Now, if you go back to the Democratic debates, all of the Democratic candidates had a chance to say that they supported confiscation of the weapons that they wanted to ban the sale of. And not a one of them, Hillary Rodham Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, not a one of them endorsed the confiscation of these so-called assault weapons. And so if, Bernie noted there are 300 million guns. We all agree on this. There are as many guns in this country as people. And so, the thing is that if they're not going to support confiscation with all of the guns that are out there, then what do they hope to accomplish? And I would say that what you're looking at are opportunistic politicians in and interest groups who really deep down know that nothing's going to happen. Like, as far as, let's say a piece of legislation passes, like we've got over here what would be effective, okay? And then we've got over here what's politically possible. And whatever the politicians end up agreeing on, it's not going to stop this from happening. And so this is the thing. I mean, I've been to countries like, you know, the UK and the Netherlands where they have confiscated weapons, except from a handful of people that meet certain criteria. And, you know, they have less gun related crime. They have less guns, I guess. But the thing is that I think until people are having that conversation, it's really useless. And I think it's a way to rile people up, to raise money for interest groups. 9 times out of 10, if you ask a gun control advocate what their plan is, they can't tell you they have a plan. They just say, we've got to do something about the guns. And it's just there's no plan. We're really talking about, you know, Plato and Aristotle, the ideal state versus what is possible here. And so that's where, you know, I think that people need to think about the way that, you know, how hyperpluralism works. You know, we've got the NRA on one side, we've got gun control groups on the other side, and they're all fundraising and they're all pushing against each other. And so you've got it set up to where nothing is going to happen. And so that's where I would be interested to hear from, you know, from Keith or from anybody else who has a proposal that A, is politically viable, as in reputable Democratic politicians will endorse it, and, you know, and maybe a few Republicans, and B, would actually do something to prevent what happened in Las Vegas last weekend. And so far, I haven't heard anything that meets both of those criteria.
Well, let me refer to a stat that you dropped earlier, Tom. The fact that you said that there was about 300 million guns in the country. I've heard other statistics, 350 million guns, 360 million guns. Basically, 1 gun per citizen at this point, or maybe like 1.2, 1.3 guns per citizen.
But we can agree, there are about as many guns in this country as there are people.
Yeah, there's a large number of firearms in this country. Now, my question to you is, it's funny because I was actually having a conversation with my father recently, and my father is a member of the NRA and is someone that is a proud gun owner. He himself owns 5 guns. He's got a rifle, Magnum, 38s, all this other stuff. And my question, I think, maybe to kick off the idea of like what would a proposal be, is do you think that there should be a limit as to how many guns a citizen can own? Because you have people that have maybe like the 1 gun that's like sitting in their drawer, like by their bed or in their closet, and maybe they use it for target practice, and maybe they have it for safety. And then there are a lot of people that have a literal arsenal that's just sitting in their house, like a whole array. And maybe because some of those guns are passed down from generation to generation, or maybe they're like a large hunting family, or maybe they're just huge gun advocates and they want to have these weapons on hand, whether for collection or for other reasons. But to kick off this conversation, do you think that there should be a cap as to how many weapons a citizen should own? Keith, let's go to you first.
Well, I don't, to be honest with you. And I agree with Tom. You know, we have to really consider, especially as, you know, AP government guys, what's pragmatic, what's constitutional, and what will work. And I'll preface this. I'm going to answer your question more in detail. I'll preface this by saying I don't think anything is really going to work in the sense that it's going to stop everything from occurring. But what I would say is if we look at something like the Brady Bill, which a lot of people said wasn't possible, it couldn't be done. And, you know, after years of legislative lobbying and you know, forming that group, you know, that was able to do that, you know, we've denied sales to about 1 million people through the Brady Bill and background checks. So it's impossible to know, you know, what, you know, was prevented by that. So it's kind of hard to prove that negative. But I would say that gun control and the sorts of regulations that I'll talk about, I think that make common sense and might be feasible, are not going to stop everything. It's only one part of the conversation. I mean, sociology and poverty and education and gun safety, and there's so much else, and culture. we're probably not going to get a chance to talk about that, but that really forms a lot of the, I think, kind of paradigmal ideas about how we think about guns in America. I was watching the Bills lose today. What the heck? What are you doing? But anyway, he lines up for the shot. He shoots a bullet right in his chest. And I was thinking, ooh, gun control debate. That's interesting. But besides all of that, what I would say is, the NRA, made a huge switch around 77 when they changed directors. And I thought that they really became more conspiratorial. It was less about gun safety and hunting and sportsmanship. And it became more about black helicopters and the tyranny of the government and the ATF. So I would think that it would be reasonable, but maybe not with the NRA standards today, to say, let's track those background checks. So if somebody is having multiple background checks within a month, let a little red light go on. I don't think anybody in balancing freedom and order would say it's unreasonable if somebody had bought 15 guns over a week period and 1,000 rounds of ammunition, that they might want to get a visit just to see what's up, not to put them in jail, not to confiscate their gun, not to reign the big government over their brains, but to possibly, find out something before it happened. So I think that makes sense. I think a national registry would make sense, but I don't think it's politically pragmatic, especially with the Congress that we have today and the way that the lines are. But I think that doing that, and then stupid stuff. Yeah, we could talk about bump stocks, and everyone says, you didn't know what a bump stock was last week. Well, I do now, right? So yeah, let's ban that. And of course, that doesn't mean that people aren't going to still get their hands on them or build them. But I was never a big fan of kind of, let's not legislate because, it might not work and people won't follow the rules. We have rules for a reason. And certainly if somebody thinks that they have to break the rules because it's their constitutional duty to have a bump stock so they can fire 100 bullets per minute to defend from who I don't know, I'd be interested to hear that argument. We could talk later about that argument of tyranny and, the intent of the Second Amendment and whether it was really for common defense and to have people able to serve in the militia. And, I believe in the Heller decision that people have an individual right to have a firearm. But like Scalia said in the Heller decision, regulation isn't off the table. All of the amendments are limited. So will it solve all the problems? No. But with that being said, I think it's pretty stupid not to do anything. But I agree with Tom that it has to be pragmatically possible.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get to the Second Amendment in a second. But Tom, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You were asking earlier, to hear some sort of proposal from somebody as to what you think might work best when it comes to regulating guns in the country. So would you have anything in mind specifically? I assume you put a little bit of thought into this. Thoughts have crossed your mind from time to time. Is there anything that you've thought of where you might have gone, that could work?
Well, the thing is, I believe that, like I said, there are some countries, like in the Netherlands, it seems to work to not have civilian ownership of firearms. You see the policemen who are riding on their bicycles with their Glocks and all that, and it looks so cute and quaint and everything. But their culture went along with that. I think one of the cases in point is, Keith is is a bit left of me, but the conversation we're having in American political culture is there seems to be a consensus around the Second Amendment that the United States is going to be a gun-owning society, and there are very few people who are who seem to have a problem with that in particular. And so I believe in terms of if people are going to have to give up a liberty, a right, that there should be some kind of payoff for that. And so when it comes down to it, I think that unless we're talking confiscation, then it's really not going to do anything.
Well,
like this guy, we could talk about the mentally ill, but then again, the mentally ill, that's a lot of people who suffer from things like, like depression or, bipolar disorder, or other things like that, maybe they're seeing a therapist, maybe they're taking meds, maybe there's somebody who owns a gun that needs help that doesn't seek that help because they don't want to get onto a registry, and be marginalized. Also, this fella in Las Vegas, I don't know of any kind of criminal record. I don't know of anything, so the thing is, I don't see really a need for any additional regulations that we have now if we're going to be a gun owning society.
But what about what I propose? You know, using the background checks to, you know, to bleep somebody if they're buying too much ammunition or they're stocking up. Because I think I might have a fundamental disagreement about the origin or the meaning of the intent of the Second Amendment, at least how I interpret it. I believe self-defense. I believe, you know, that kind of idea that, you know, you're allowed to hunt, you're allowed to defend your home. I'm not bought on the idea that really the intent was to guard yourself against the government. And that whole idea, that's why I need an M16. That's why I should be able to, you know, have 50,000 rounds of ammo in my shed so the black helicopters can come, you know, I can fight them off. Because you're never going to have a level playing field. According to that argument, I should be able to have, you know, nuclear weapons in order to fight myself for my own government. So I do think that there are things that we can look at that aren't going to solve the problem, right? And, you know, in a different world, I might be for relooking at the Second Amendment. That's an allowable thing in our Constitution, but I know we're not there, and that's not going to happen. So what I'm talking about is just stupid stuff, like not being able to buy loads and loads and loads of weapons and ammo to stock up. You know, certain regulations that just kind of make sense. In the Old West, they confiscate your gun when you came into town. You know, so maybe we need to make America great again. I joke, but I do believe that, you know, common sense should prevail. We can come together and come up with some things that, no, won't stop the problem. And yeah, might be a little, I don't know, a little bit inconvenient for gun owners. You know, maybe they have to take an extra course, or maybe there's, you know, when they stopped in the 90s saying that non-industry gun control couldn't be researched, it was like, why? Why not? I mean, we're living in a smarter society. What's wrong with the idea of you have a gun, that gun is linked to your fingerprint? What's wrong with that? Or serial numbers that are, you know, unremovable, so everything is traceable. So at least making it easier to walk backwards through, you know, after the fact of a crime. It took like 3 days to figure out where the dude got his guns because everything's like kept on paper and like people's old dusty shelves and such. Let's electrify it. Let's electronicify it. You know what I mean? Let's make it a little easier so we can solve these cases, and at least that we can use our resources to identify possible problems before they occur. And again, that's not going to stop everything. It's just stupid not to do it.
We've obviously been having a discussion now when it comes to the Second Amendment. Second Amendment has come up time and time again already in this conversation, and I think it would be nice if we jump into that. The two of you being historians, I trying to be a historian. I think we should discuss. So the Second Amendment, one of the Bill of Rights, number 2 on the list, one of the big 3, if you will, big 4, big 5. It's one of the top 10. It's way up there. So let me ask you this: there was recently an article. Or an op-ed piece, I should say, that was in the New York Times. I don't know if you guys read it, but there was an op-ed piece in the New York Times calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment. Now, I know that this is not the first time that somebody has called for the repeal of the Second Amendment. This has happened time and time again. People have called for the repeal of the Second Amendment, saying stuff like, it makes no sense for it to be there. There are other countries that don't have a Second Amendment like ours, the right to keep arms and the right to bear arms in their constitution, because it should automatically be deemed as a natural right. Why are we worrying about, you know what I'm saying? So my question to you is, when it comes to the Second Amendment, are people that much more reluctant to have a discussion about it because it is one of the Bill of Rights? It's number 2, not number 22. And in terms of the Second Amendment, would there maybe be a closer look at the amendment itself and whether or not it might need not repealing, but maybe some sort of revision to clarify the language as to what exactly the right to bear arms means in the 21st century?
Okay, and was that directed at me?
Either one of you can go.
Okay,
You go, Tom.
and Keith, how's my audio now?
Oh, your audio was okay. It was, yeah, your audio was fine.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I'm put the headset up on just in case. But as far as that goes, I really do. After traveling internationally, I view this in a very black and white way. Now, as far as we're either a gun owning society or we're not, and if we are a gun owning society, anyone without a criminal record should have the same thing to do in the marketplace. Now this is where you go into different views of government. Like I really don't view government as necessarily, but this is one thing. Like Keith has more of a progressive mindset that, hey, it may not work, it may not do anything, but we need to at least try something. Whereas I'd like to see, okay, we are fairly sure that this is going to work. It's kind of like when you look at the New Deal programs,
But
a
there's
lot
a
of
lot
them.
of dead people.
What's that?
But it's different. The New Deal, we're talking about unemployment or bad crops. Here we're talking about, 12,000 dead people a year. Since 1968, when you include suicides, we've had more deaths at the end of a bullet than all the wars.
No. We're not including suicides. We're not including suicides.
I mean, they count. You know how many people wouldn't do it because they had the gun was right there, and it's mostly middle-aged, older white guys. If they didn't have the gun there, and I'm not saying it's possible to do that, it's a lot harder to stab yourself or take those pills. Just easier because you just pull the trigger. It's a 1 second.
It's not hard to
drive by
and put a hose into your car from the exhaust pipe.
I know, but it takes 1 second. That takes 45 minutes to set up or whatever I'm talking about.
It's a lot less messy. It's a lot less messy.
I mean,
House of Cards, it worked out.
It's different. It's different. It's just you can't say it's not different. It's different. That's why there's no drive-by. That's why there's no drive-by knifings.
Okay, now the thing is, Keith, I tend to be I've got a lot of sympathies with classical liberalism, and if an adult chooses to commit suicide, that's their choice. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's their choice. I'm just not going to include suicides in violent crime statistics, which have been going down. It's like there is less gun-related crime than there was in the 1990s. It's just that we have these really sensationalized mass shootings that in a country as large as ours are very tragic, but at the same time, if all of the data is looked at empirically, there are less people dying from gun-related crimes as used to. You talk about these people who are getting ready for the black helicopters, all that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes down to it, I mean, I only have 3 guns. I don't really have a big horse in this race. But as far as that goes, and I probably wouldn't have enough ammunition to last a week if we were going into a Walking Dead scenario. I should probably work on that. But at the same time, these people aren't hurting anybody. I mean,
McVeigh was. I mean, sometimes
that was a truck full of fertilizer, Keith.
Right, but I know. But this idea of this fear of government, this idea that they're coming to get us, it's something we have to keep an eye on, whether we're relating it to the gun thing or not. I mean, there are people who they're just a little cuckoo, man. Paranoia, deep destroyer, and I just don't think the idea of it being cool and legal to gather up 10,000 weapons or whatever the hell it is a really good idea in a free republic.
Yeah, well, and that could be discussed, but as far as this guy, okay, now this guy that did this, and we still have a lot of unanswered questions. We're not 100% sure this guy hadn't been radicalized. I'm not going to claim. I mean, I'm not going to get out an Alex Jones article or anything like that. But as far as we're not sure who this guy was, he seemed to know what he was doing. I don't think he bought those guns within a month of committing the crime. I think this guy had been collecting for some time. I'm just not sure how he would have come up on the radar. Another thing is that not just any Tom, Dick, and Harry could have done what he did. This guy, I was reading that on, whatever he had written down on the paper was angles. He knew the trajectory and all of this kind of stuff. It's this was a very special case in the sense, I even consulted a retired Army officer whose opinion I respect very much. And I asked him, could somebody have done this in the 1960s with technology that existed then? And he said, absolutely. I mean, this is one of those things. Yeah. It's not that there is more technology available now, but, what we could, maybe we can't do anything about all of the negative energy that's being thrown around. But, we've seen this elevation in these mass shootings. How do you, I don't know. I mean, it's something that, I almost wonder if it's the First Amendment that we need to be talking about. And as much as I hate to say something like that, but, you know, should it be legal for the media to, you know, put these people's faces on TV and their life stories and all of that kind of stuff and give these people the, you know, the road to immortality? You know, you kill 50 people and you become the news story for a week or two, you know, and this is one of those things that, you know, I wonder, you know, and, you know, is Bill O'Reilly, when he said, you know, this is part of living in a free society, is he right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's something to grapple with.
So I mean, I think my question is like it seems like you say, okay, there is a line somewhere. It's just what's pragmatic and what's constitutional. So what would happen just in the scenario if we go with it? Let's say we have 3 of these a week. Really, let's say that like every other day there's, you know, 400 people shot or something like that. I mean, at what point do people start saying, all right, you know, government has to do something to make us safer? You can't have freedom without order. I think we all agree on that, right? So yeah. I'm just saying, if it becomes more and more and more, and that's why I don't like having the conversation right when it happens, because everybody automatically goes to, well, this guy did it this way and you're suggesting wouldn't have stopped that. And I think it's just more about like common sense, like ideas. Just like we've already figured out the background check. Now, I'm in favor of shutting down the private sales without a background check. So if I'm, you know, put my M16 on Craigslist and Jimmy Crack Corn comes to buy it, you know, family friend of a family friend, and I sell it to him, that's perfectly legal, right? I believe it is. And now he goes and he shoots 100 people, right? That's going to happen. It's going to happen. So let's have that conversation now before it happens, because I don't think that's an unreasonable limitation on the Second Amendment, that, oh my God, I can't sell my M16 out of my garage anymore. I have to fill out a paperwork with the black helicopter people, right? No?
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, that's not something, I'm not recoiling or anything like that when I hear that. Yeah. I'm just skeptical as far as what that is, you know, what it's going to accomplish. I mean, that's my own.
It's going to stop someone that wants to do harm from easily being able to do that. That's what it's going to do. So, I mean, it's not unreasonable to do that if the consequence or the, you know, the hurt to liberty is, oh crap, I got to fill out a piece of paper. But if the fear is, and this is what's stopping that in the NRA is, yeah, but what are you going to do once you get those names on that piece of paper? You're coming for my guns, aren't you? Then we're never going to be able to accomplish anything. If, you know, if I pass a law because, you know, I don't want to, you know, people to cross the street and get hit so they can't cross at the stop sign, you know, not everything is a snowball effect. We have to be able to at least trust our government under the guise of the Constitution and maybe the Heller decision and, you know, legitimate forms of checks and balances to be able to give things a shot without us drowning in the sea of, oh my God, you know, they're coming to get my guns.
I just think, maybe. I mean, when it comes to the idea of a national registry, I mean, and the argument has been brought up time and again that from the NRA and from gun advocates, a lot of people say, well, most American gun owners, and this is true, they'll say most American gun owners are responsible. They know how to properly tend to the weapon. They know how to properly take care of the weapon. They know how to properly store the weapon, so forth and so on. So if you have this many responsible gun owners in the United States, and if you do the math again, if there is 1.2 or 1.3 guns per citizen. So clearly there are a lot of responsible gun owners in the United States that have a few weapons in their home. Then why do you feel there is such a backlash towards the idea of national registry? That there is such a backlash towards the idea of, okay, let's make it a little bit more stricter. Because if you're a responsible person, then you should have no real issue with a bit more, I get law when it comes to what weapon you have in your house and what you might be doing with that weapon. If you're somebody that's responsible, if you're somebody that, like, you know, I use this because of X or I use this because of Y, you can list all the reasons why you've had these guns in your family for however many number of years. Time and time again, you've proven that, you know, this is what the guns are for in your home. So then why do you think that there's such a backlash from responsible Americans that say, oh, no, you can't, what? This is preposterous. I will not fill out, and I will not dot another I or cross another T. because I've already filled out all necessary paperwork. I've got the license. I took all the classes for my conceal and carry. What else do you need from me? Shit. I've already done everything I needed to do. So,
don't curse. Kids watch this.
Sorry, that one came out. I became very emotional.
Bleep that.
But,
Okay. Now the thing is here, I mean, but what you're telling me is, I mean, it's not Vladimir Putin's or Rocket Man's business how many guns I have in my home. Okay. I mean, that's the thing. If you think about this, you know, you think about the possibility of hacks, you know, where Game of Thrones episodes are coming out before, you know, they're out there. Of course, HBO did one of those on their own, but all of these hacks that, you know, the credit bureaus, you know, nobody's immune to this. And do you really want a foreign element or a criminal element having information about, oh, you know, this person's got this gun, and this gun, and they're in their house and all of that. And so the thing is, Keith, I think you bring up a great point when you said that what if there were multiple shootings a week? What if gun-related crime were actually going up? And so what I think that we need to remember here is even in the midst of that tragedy in a nation as large as ours, the rule of law has not broken down. And so that's the thing. I think if we were to see a legitimate breakdown in the rule of law, I think people would be, you know, more willing to have some of these discussions.
Well, I'd like to talk to the families of the 475 people that died in 372 mass shootings in 2015. It's still, if we're talking about, well, it's going down and the numbers are we lost 9,000 rather than 10,000, you know, that's a massive problem, a massive problem. I'm looking at the wrong camera. A massive, massive problem. And I think we need to identify it at that. If we're losing, you know, 3 loads of 9/11s every year due to gun violence, we need to figure something out. And if that's not banning, then, you know, it might not be always a government solution. I agree with Tom on that front. But I do think that, you know, it's the 21st century. I'd watch the Jetsons, man. They were doing crazy stuff. So, like, it doesn't make sense to me. Why can't we figure that out? Like fingerprint technology or, you know, whatever it might be. You know, how many children shoot each other playing with a stupid gun because it was sitting there in mom's purse? You know, stuff like that, preventable deaths. We can balance. We're so smart. We have a car on Mars. We have a car on Mars. We can figure out technology in order to allow people to defend their homes, to feel safe and secure, to exercise those Second Amendment rights, whether that means, you know, killing innocent animals and eating their flesh like carnivores do. I snuck in a vegetarian comment. How about that? And still having liberty. You know, doing both. I think that is possible. Maybe not, but I do.
Obviously, a lot of you guys that are watching on YouTube right now, you guys are letting us know your thoughts in the comment section, and we hope that you continue to do so.
Now, just let me respond to that though, Sammy, because he did ask about accidental gun deaths, and what we're talking about here. Now, I'm pulling up something real fast here. You know, some statistics on Wikipedia for 2013. 505 deaths due to accidental or negligent discharge of a firearm. So you've got in a country of over 300 million people. I mean, we're talking.
So what's the number in Japan? They have half our population. What's the number?
Japan, maybe less. Do they have civilian ownership of firearms in Japan?
That's the point. That's the point. That all of these guns lacking the technology, they're dangerous. Obviously, I had a friend. You know, I had a cousin who committed suicide at the age of 16 with a shotgun. And I had another person who lived in the neighborhood who would, you know, accidentally shot his friend in the face. And all I'm saying is, let's, you know, 500. Yeah, 500 kids, people. Let's figure it out. We can figure it out. But to turn a blind eye to the gun lobby and to say, you own this, you own all of the technology and all of the safety and all of the regulation, I think that's doing us a disservice as a country that can engage in pluralistic, you know, kind of ways to come together and figure it out. Don't you think it's possible to use technology to radically lower that as we progress forward as a society?
See, I don't think that any, I mean, it's just like you said. I think that we are a gun-bearing society or we're not. And so if that technology's out there, it's going to cause problems. But I don't necessarily believe that technology can solve everything. I mean, because
Not
I really,
everything.
Keith,
No,
I really do think
I
that
agree.
it is a problem in our society. You could give every Dutchman a gun in their house, okay? Give every Dutchman an assault rifle, and it's not going to make a bit of difference. I mean, negligible difference maybe, because they are a less violent and less negative culture.
So
And I
okay,
think that
okay,
we do need to have that discussion as well.
okay.
That just a conversation about technology is not going to
No,
change the
no, it's
toxic culture that we have.
no, I agree with you. That's why it has to be multifaceted. But to give up on the conversation because it's complicated and no one answer is going to be the solution just seems like silly season. So, for instance, why the pushback like domestic violence crimes? We have a federal law. If you're engaged in domestic violence, you can't have a gun. But at the state level, a lot of the state laws don't enforce that and look the other way. Like that's just stupid. I don't know what the numbers are. I think it's 500. I think I saw it. It was like something like around 1,000 women are shot, by their spouses because there's a loaded gun in the house. No. Well, so let's put our brains. How can we not fix that? And that's what you say, and I agree. We can't fix that because that goes to the idea we're a violent culture. But what sort of things can limit that without, getting in the way completely of the liberty to have that self-defense? So if you are, have numerous calls on domestic violence claims, yeah, you shouldn't have a gun. At least you calm down, brother, and show that you're safe enough to have one. Or when you get a gun, how do I know you know how to use it? I could just sell anybody a gun, right? I gotta get a driver's license to drive the stupid car. So if you're gonna give someone a semi-automatic weapon because they have $1,000 in their back pocket, it just seems ludicrous not to at least to go through some process to make sure that the situation is safe as possible. And yeah, that means some bureaucracy, and Tom will point this out. It becomes bloated and red tape, and it's not fair all the time, and people that are innocent will get targeted, all that. I understand that, but that's the residue of living in a free society where you're balancing liberty and order. So I wish I had better answers.
Well, I mean, again, this is something that I wanted to bring up earlier. Tom had mentioned that he had traveled to a few different countries and had seen their populations. And Keith, I imagine you've traveled a bit around the world as well. Maybe.
Not really.
Okay. But
I go to Canada a lot.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Hey, get out of here.
But question. So a lot of people following the Vegas shooting, proponents of gun control, advocates of gun control, a lot of them point to countries like England. A lot of them point to countries like Australia. A lot of them point to them and say, see, how did they do it? How did they figure it out? And we're sitting over here, mass shooting Sandy Hook, mass shooting Vegas, mass shooting Aurora, mass shooting Albuquerque. Steve is getting shot on a baseball field. Gabby Gifford's getting shot at a meet and greet. And my question to you is, what do you think, might be some components that allow European countries, foreign countries, Australia, England, the Netherlands, whatever, what have you, to have a significantly less amount of gun-related violence, gun-related death? Is it because of population size? Is it because you think of cultural upbringing? Is it because all these countries have gone through revolution, all these countries have fought wars, all these countries have armies, all these countries have militaries, all these countries have, forces that are there to defend them. So the idea of violence is not lost on any of these societies, but a lot of people will point to these other countries and to these peoples and to these cultures and say, it's not happening over there as much. I mean, it happens from time to time, sure, but it's not happening at the rate that it happens in the United States. So to the both of you, I posit the question, why is it that the United States is leading when it comes to gun-related deaths worldwide? Is it because we are a violent society? Is it because that just happens to be our nature? Is it because we have the Second Amendment and because it's one of the crown jewels of the Constitution? Is it because of our upbringing? Is it because we were also a rebellious nation once upon a time, 200 X years ago?
You know, Sammy, let me jump onto that, you know, because I think that you're getting onto something here. Because if you think about this, Americans, you know, really have a distinct political culture that really has its roots in the American Revolution. Now, those people that say, oh, yeah, you know, I've got my guns, so the government, you know, I can fight against the government if it becomes a tyranny, they're going to show up while you're at work. You know, it's not like that's going to do anything. The government has much better weapons than you do, and they've probably got some of those things that can put a frequency in your ear that you'll just, who knows? Who knows? What they've got? Yeah, yeah. And then all of a sudden you're out. You know, we don't know what the government has. But here's the thing, that in what other westernized country are the foundations of that country built on the idea that their ancestors were tyrannized by their own government? Okay, I mean, and when you look at the American Revolution, you know, this whole idea, and of course, when we think about real, like, 20th century tyrannies, it's like, wow, okay, like, oh, we were just like taxed a little bit without representation. But I think that memory of, you know, just this, I mean, and really it's our, I mean, it's propaganda, but it's our propaganda, you know, that it's just, you know, that we fought a revolution against this tyrannical government. And, you know, this Minuteman is glorified, even though the Minutemen really weren't pivotal in a lot of battles. You know, a lot of it was, you know, these poor, you know, immigrant types that were, you know, serving in Washington's army. You know, it wasn't like this, you know, the local pharmacist, citizen soldier. Of course, there was the local pharmacist. His name was Benedict Arnold. But you know, at the same time, you know, I think that there is a degree of, you know, and I think it ranges from skepticism. Like, I mean, I'm, you know, skeptical that government can really do anything to solve this problem absent of confiscating anything that they ban the sale of. You know, that's the thing. If the sale of something is going to be regulated or banned and it's not going to be followed up by confiscation, of course, you've also got the 3D printers now that, you know, what good's that going to do? Like Keith said, you can make one of these bump stocks. So, you know, if you've got the right tools. So, but I really do think that, you know, the American, you know, the American psyche, there's just something about that sort of individualism. You know, one of my coworkers said that Americans don't care about humanity. And I started thinking about it and I was like, you know what? I think she's got a point. You know, when you think about it, a lot of Americans, after what happened in Las Vegas, you know, Monday morning, they were at the gun store. You know, like, I've got to protect myself from people like this. And I think we've got to do something to make the society safer, but I've got to protect myself. There's this almost like this pioneer when you think Frederick Jackson Turner and this, you know, this whole kind of frontier element that I think a lot of Americans still picture themselves as living on this frontier. What do you think, Keith?
Yeah, and I think it's ironic because I agree with you. I really do, especially kind of this frontier aspect and, you know, this individualistic kind of concept. And that's what your friend was probably alluding to. We care less about humanity. We're always thinking about ourselves. But what's ironic is in that strong, masculine American, you know, manifest destiny, you know, lies fear. That's, I think, a better answer for me in terms of why all the gun violence is that we're scared of each other, that we're scared of, you know, forming groups with people who are different than us. We're scared of, you know, releasing, you know, the feeling of safety or whatever it might be. I'm not so sure. I understand what Tom is saying about, you know, our roots being in rebellion, but, you know, you look at the French, their revolution, that was pretty bloody, man. You know, I think that the idea of fear, and some of this I think goes to like advertising and marketing and our culture and video. I'm not blaming video. I'm not going to blame anything on there. But I do think that this idea that there's someone out to get me and that, you know, I got my finger on the trigger so I'm secure, leads to a lot of violence. It leads to a lot of, you know, problem solving with guns because it's so easy to go to, especially when it's easy accessible. It's right there. I can just grab it and go fix my problem. I think that culture and fear, I think that's probably my best answers. But I'll go back to this idea that I think me and Tom do have common ground to a certain degree. He might have less faith that government has any way of solving this, but at least he's open to the suggestion of certain things that we might be able to approach in a pragmatic way. And I'd like to get past
Now, Keith, just to be clear, I think the only pragmatic solution is confiscation. I don't think anything short of that is pragmatic.
Okay, so bump stocks on Target shelves.
Target, I don't think Target would. I
don't
think Target's going to carry that.
Okay, well, whatever the hell.
I mean, I've shot a gun with. I think that I've shot. I mean, I don't know what it's called. You know, it's kind of like I watch football. Half the time, I don't know what's going on.
But this is a serious conversation. If they make one that can shoot 1,000 bullets a second, then what?
Well, now here's the thing, and this is actually the position of the NRA, that if any device that turns something into an automatic weapon, you know, should be illegal, and you know, the ATF does have the authority to regulate some of this stuff. Right. So I think that's a mistake on the part of the executive branch.
Why do they have to be so hairy about it? Why can't they just take a stand? That would have been nice if the NRA, well, with fuzzy language, just said, yeah, we should ban that. That's it. That's it. Drop the ball, move away from so we can at least say, wow, we can have a conversation back and forth. But then we go to this, oh, it's defined by the ATF, and we have to figure out whether it'll meet the code or not. And then they'll have to go back to Congress. They'll have to pass another piece of legislation. And maybe, you know, it'll never happen. And again, you're right. People can print it on their 3D printer. I get that. But if they could print a, you know, chemical weapon, we'd still ban it. That's the point. And then make the penalty so goddamn sick that people would never do it, or they'd be afraid to do it. You know, we did it with machine guns for the most part. I haven't seen too many Al Capone machine guns being, you know, walked around with and used in crimes.
Yes, because I mean that would be confiscated, and that would be forcibly taken away from someone. They'd get jail time, and so that's why I think that banning the sale of something without also banning the ownership of something is really just it's a feel good measure, and so
get them off the.
You know, that's really.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, yeah, but that's really where I stand on that. Is if you're just banning the sale, I don't think that it's really going to do anything.
Not now, but if the point is to get more dangerous weapons off the street, if we combine it with Australia did this with a buyback program, make it really lucrative to get the really dangerous military grade weapons off the streets, because eventually the ones that are used in crimes, whether it's in Chicago, people always point to Chicago, right? Like, oh, well, you know, those people in Chicago, right? But they're not buying their guns in Chicago, right? They're buying them in Gary, Indiana or something. So if we could have that conversation that it's better to have less really dangerous weapons. What can we do if confiscation is not the answer to at least make that more of a reality? Right. And that might be a buyback. That might be banning it. And, you know, so the future weapons are not sold and we can start to whittle it down. So in 30 or 40 years, there's not as many of those very, very dangerous weapons out on the street that are accessible in an easy way. And I think my point is that guns are different than everything else because they're so easy. It's just you squeeze the trigger and that's it. Then the 100 bullets come raining down. So that's why I think this conversation has to be different. I don't buy that argument of, oh, well, you know, if you could drive people in a car and run them over or club them with a big seal, whatever. It's a different beast, which means we have to have a different sort of conversation. But yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know.
I mean, needless to say, I mean, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be solving the gun issue tonight. I wish we could. I really wish we could. I swear to God, because that would have been so cool. We could have like solved everything. Everybody would have been cool. We could have moved on to other topics that are much lighter in discussion, like, you know, snacks. I'd love to do a whole discussion, a 1 hour discussion on the history of Oreos. That would be one of the most tremendous discussions of my life, hands down. But
I heard I think, is it true? Isn't there marshmallow inside an Oreo, right?
All I know is that it's a vegan product.
Oh, is it really?
Well, that's why the rats they respond to it like they respond to crack cocaine. People need to be eating less Oreos and more meat.
Okay, whatever.
Don't knock my Oreos, Tom. How dare you, man? I have only a few vices in life, that being one of them. Please don't ruin my Oreos for me. Well, listen, first of all, let me just say to everybody that's been watching, I haven't been looking at the comments, unfortunately, but I imagine.
Oh, I have. It is very interesting
conversation in the
before we end this,
Yes, sir.
Keith, you have certifiable deplorables in your chat room. It's you've got to go back and look at it.
Now, at least the people that can't stand me now because of my moderate views on guns, look, now I'm a pinko.
Always ready with the props. He's like,
what does that say? I'm just downright red. I guess I wore the wrong color.
I'm just wearing the black with a Superman symbol because I have no reason other than it's a cool shirt. Anyway, listen, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with the three of us tonight. I know there are other things you could have been doing with your Sunday evening, but the fact that you came and hung out with us makes me feel all nice and warm and fuzzy, and I think it does the same for Tom and Keith as well. So we're probably going to do this again because to be honest with you, the three of us, we have lives, but to an extent. After that, we just kind of have to fill that dead time with other things, and luckily one of those things is speaking to each other, of which I am eternally grateful. By the way, guys, for those of you that have not subscribed to Mr. Ritchie's YouTube channel, please do so.
What are you doing?
That'd be very.
What are you doing?
Go ahead and plug the channel, man. Where are people going to find you, and what button should they click?
All right. And of course, you know, if you're here, hopefully you're subscribed to Hughes. My name is Tom Ritchie, Tom, R-I-C-H-E-Y. You know, you probably see me on his channel thing or something like that. But, you know, by all means, and thank y'all for, you know, it's good to have a civil discussion over all of this stuff. And I hope that the people watching, you know, like I said, I don't think this discussion's going anywhere. So we might as well, hopefully you got some educational value if you're taking U.S. history or U.S. government and learning about the fundamentals of American political culture and how people think about government and that sort of thing. So, you know, a pleasure to be here on the channel with you, Keith. And, you know, there aren't many civil discussions left on these things. So, you know, great to be able to discuss that.
And I would like to, once again, everybody, go subscribe if you're not subscribed to Tom Ritchie. And Sammy Drews, our friend from US 101, go to subscribe to his channel as well. We'll be putting the description links down in the description below, so you can do that really easily. And yeah, and if you're not subscribed to me, I don't even want to look at your face anymore. Make sure you. I don't.
Make sure I'm subscribed to Keith here.
I don't. All right, Sammy. You're doing such a great job moderating. You do the close, brother man.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm gonna hang around the chat room for a little bit. So if anybody, you know, it looks pretty lit in there. So y'all don't go away quite yet. I'll spend
know how many subscribers I lost.
Yes.
All right, better you than me. That's why I don't do it on my channel. Sammy.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. And since this is Hughes' channel, we're gonna end it the way he always does, where attention goes, energy flows. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keith, hit the unlive button so the three of us can laugh at people.
3, 2, 1.